At this point, I'm sure many of you have seen the movie where Thomas Shelby program manages the Manhattan Project. But what Nolan didn't really have time to delve into in his movie is the cultural impact that the birth of the atomic age had on the United States of America. And that early impact was both profound and surprisingly shallow. I'm your host David, and today we are going to be looking at the immediate cultural impact that the atomic bomb had on American society. Buckle up your lead aprons as we talk nuclear haircuts, isotopic dresses, and even radioactive gardening. This is the Cold War. Mention of nuclear weapons and the Cold War often brings to mind dire things like mutually assured destruction, overkill, and Bert the Turtle's fun lessons on duck and cover. What's far less frequently brought to mind, though, is cocktails at the Desert Inn or picnic lunches with the family, but the Cold War is never a simple or straightforward narrative, as I hope anyone who subscribes to this channel has come to realize. For all the fears of nuclear destruction that would become a very real part of the Cold War, Americans were remarkably calm about the bomb, at least for a short period of time. In a 1947 study on the thinking of the American public on matters relating to the development of the atomic bomb, conducted by the Committee on the Social Aspects of Atomic Energy, showed that half of the respondents were not worried at all about the atomic bomb, and many said they were only worried a little bit, with only 25% admitting to being worried. And for many, being not worried was the least of it. For a certain period of the early Cold War, many Americans were practically giddy about the new American marvel of weapons technology. While the original work of the Manhattan Project was intended to be kept secret, once the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had occurred, the secret was out, and future nuclear tests became much more public. With that public knowledge came extreme interest from the people, and much like many other spectacles of engineering, like the Hoover Dam or the Empire State Building, the American populace decided that the best possible way to appreciate the nuclear bomb was to road trip across the country and watch nuclear detonations with their friends and families. Between 1951 and 1962, hundreds of above-ground nuclear detonations were carried out, with at least 100 of them in the Nevada desert at the Nevada test site, only 65 miles from Las Vegas. Sin City, a veritable boomtown in the 1950s, was more than happy to capitalize on this new attraction, just as it had with the building of the Boulder Dam. The city rebranded itself from Gateway to the Boulder Dam to Atomic City and began to encourage atomic tourism. The Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce issued dozens of press releases in the days after the first test at the Nevada test site in January of 1951. They described the new testing grounds as a local attraction for tourists. In February of that year, the New York Times' Gladwin Hill wrote that, quote, Las Vegas takes nearby bomb tests with a poker face. And he referred to the city as an atomic boomtown in the desert, saying that Las Vegas could be described as pleased with the tests. This was especially true as it had created an influx of visitors rather than an exodus, and by April, Hill was writing of the boom to Las Vegas tourism, stating that by the end of the first series of blasts, motels throughout Las Vegas were filling up nightly with tourists curious enough to spend half the chill night huddled in blankets outside their lodgings in order to not miss the dawn detonations. Las Vegas understood the strength of the atomic craze in America. Gladwin Hill wrote that the town's publicity man has had a local hairdresser create an atomic coiffure and has rushed out to the nation's press a collection of bathing beauties equipped with Geiger counters. The iconic mushroom cloud soon began to appear on postcards, and the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce was quick to jump into the scene by helping to market the tests, issuing a calendar for tourists. The calendar listed all the scheduled detonation times and even gave suggestions for the best places to view the explosions from the safety and comfort of Las Vegas establishments, such as the Desert Inn, whose Sky Room was, at the time it opened in 1950, the tallest structure on the Las Vegas Strip, and the lounge offered a panoramic view of the horizon. Many entertainment venues advertised dawn bomb parties, where guests would party the night away, waiting for the pre-dawn testing of the bomb to light up the sky. For those looking for a more family-friendly viewing opportunity, Mount Charleston's Desert View Overlook Trail offered a place to watch the blasts taking place at the Nevada test site with a picnic basket and a snack. And even if you weren't at a party and simply taking an early morning swim at your hotel pool, tourists might have taken a moment to gander at the mushroom cloud as one photo from May 8, 1953, captured. Even in between tests, which averaged one every 3 weeks for 12 years, Las Vegas wasn't free of the obsession with the bomb. Establishments began to market items like the atomic cocktail to visitors, while Vegas showgirls, like Terry True, sported the atomic hairdo, which emulated the mushroom cloud that followed an atomic bomb's explosion. What these press agents won't think of, from one Las Vegas beauty salon comes this hairstyle modeled by showgirl Terry True, and that big upsweep at the top is supposed to symbolize a mushroom cloud effect of a bomb explosion. The dark ring is a switch with a jeweled clip to brighten things up. Miss Atomic pageants began to be held as well. There were several of those beauty pageants during the 1950s, many of them held in Las Vegas. In 1953, the North Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce chose Atomic City as the theme of their annual parade, and Miss Paula Harris won the title of Miss A-Bomb and rode on the Chamber of Commerce float. In 1955, Linda Lawson, a dancer at the Sands Hotel and Casino, was named Ms. Q, named after Operation Q. Lawson was famously photographed in her swimsuit, sporting a cotton mushroom cloud on her head. Amusingly, and in true soldierly fashion, after high winds caused tests from Operation Q to be rescheduled several times, some clever soldiers renamed it Operation Ms. Q. The last of these atomic beauty pageants was held in 1957, and Lee Merlin was crowned the final Ms. Atomic Bomb. A famous photograph of her wearing a swimsuit covered in a cotton mushroom cloud, taken by Don English of the Las Vegas Sun, was distributed nationally. But before we give the wrong idea, it wasn't just Las Vegas that saw a boom, no pun intended, in atomic tourism. Many of the cities involved in the creation of the nuclear bomb saw a boom in tourist attention due to the atomic craze. In April of 1951, the New Mexico State Tourist Bureau told the New York Times that they had been deluged with travel inquiries that spring. Much of the current publicity regarding additions to the scene as the AEC's Los Alamos base and the rocket testing grounds at White Sands. 1957, the atomic town of Los Alamos would become a tourist attraction when it opened itself to visitors. A year later, in 1958, the New York Times wrote that the Gate Guardhouse, which used to protect entry to the town, now served as a hot dog and hamburger emporium with curb service. The author of the article marvels at the dedication of tourists to seeing the town, as the location was remote and not overly hospitable to tourism. Los Alamos is, quote, at a highway dead end. Overnight accommodations are not plentiful, and no effort has been made to transform it into a tourist mecca. Still, Hill writes that there is an unusual thrill in coming close to the nerve center of such epical work. And this followed a pattern that had been seen since 1949, when Oak Ridge, Tennessee opened up to tourism when the American Museum of Atomic Energy at Oak Ridge, managed by the Institute of Nuclear Studies, opened its doors. Tourism wasn't the only industry to capitalize on the atomic craze either. Everyone from children's toy manufacturers to candy companies got in on this atomic economic boom. Nello Ferrera of the Ferrera Candy Company created the atomic fireball in 1954. The name and the packaging played into the American obsession with the bomb, using the mushroom cloud and name to boost popularity of the candy. The candy became so popular, in fact, that the company couldn't keep up with demand. Orders exceeded 50,000 cases of candy per day, while the company only had capacity to produce 200 cases per day. The company had to increase their production capabilities due to the demand. In the world of toys, 1950 saw the A.C. Gilbert Company release the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab toy set, which was designed to allow children to create and watch nuclear and chemical reactions using real radioactive material. Alfred Carlton Gilbert, inventor of the Erector set and owner of the company, described the Atomic Energy Laboratory as, quote, the most spectacular of their new educational toys. Now, if you're worried about the fact that the set came with 4 glass jars containing natural uranium-bearing ore samples, don't worry, the set's instructions very clearly told children not to break the seals on the jars, and the company reassured everyone that, quote, all radioactive materials included with the Atomic Energy Lab have been certified as completely safe by Oak Ridge Laboratories, part of the Atomic Energy Commission. Well, it might seem a bit wild to think that for the price of $49.50 in 1950, which is about $600 today, you could expose your own children to U-238. We feel the need to remind our viewers that between 2000 and 2018, the Grand Canyon National Park accidentally left 3 5-gallon buckets of uranium ore in a taxidermy exhibit at the park's museum. Radiation levels have been deemed to be harmless from the buckets, provided nobody was licking them. So, in that light, while the Atomic Energy Laboratory seems ill-advised to modern sensibilities, we still aren't as careful in the present day as we probably could be about these kinds of things. Gilbert wrote that the government encouraged the set's development because it believed the lab would aid public understanding of atomic energy and emphasize its constructive aspects. This was a time when the positive uses of atomic energy were very much being emphasized. Atomic energy was the bright energy source for the future. In 1954, the International Nickel Company ran advertisements on the ways that atomic materials were being used by doctors to track down and treat disease. Their Even This Cloud Has a Silver Lining ad detailed how irradiated isotopes were used to diagnose thyroid conditions. 1955, the World Health Organization endorsed participation in a program of applying nuclear energy to medicine and devising means of protection against atomic radiation. The 1950s saw the Atoms for Peace program begin to develop peaceful and societally beneficial uses for fission energy. This program is one which we should actually thank for many of the fruits and vegetables we take for granted in the present day. Atomic gardens, or gamma gardens, were designed with the aim of testing the effects of radiation on plant life and finding beneficial mutations that could give plants useful characteristics. Eventually, this experimentation would give us plants with increased resilience to bad weather and faster growth rates. Muriel Howarth, an atomic activist from the United Kingdom, would establish the Atomic Gardening Society in 1959. The goal was to bring atomic energy and experimentation into the lives of ordinary citizens. The society crowdsourced research, sending members irradiated seeds to plant in their own gardens. They would then report back to Howarth on the results. Other, more aggressive forms of atomic gardening were a bit more involved. Scientists arranged typical gardens in a circle with a radiation source at the center, which allowed plants in different parts of the circle to be exposed to different levels of radiation. Plants close to the radiation sources usually died, and mid-range plants would develop tumors and growths. At the far reaches of the garden, however, plants typically survived, but with significant mutations. Many of those mutations were useful and then bred into normal plants that we all benefit from today. A peppermint plant resistant to verticillium, which we know as Todd's Mitchum's cultivar, produces most of the world's mint oil today, which means you have gamma gardening to thank for everything from toothpaste to chewing gum. The most common grapefruit in the world, the ruby red, as well as most varieties of sweet corn, several breeds of black beans, Reimei rice, and the gold Nijisseiki pear, which is resistant to black spot disease, are all variations that were first produced during this era of irradiated gardening experiments. Hundreds of flower varietals from tulips to roses to carnations have resulted from radiation gardening. And for any of you who are watching this and thinking that it bears an eerie similarity to the in-game universe from the Fallout video games, you would be entirely correct. The premise in the Fallout world is that the transistor was never invented, meaning there was no shift to electronics and digitization, but instead an ever-increasing reliance on these atomic-based programs being developed in the 1950s. Fallout is a great piece of alternate history world building rooted in actual events. But to bring things back to the actual 1950s, with all of these cultural and scientific impacts, it might seem that the atomic craze in American history brought more good than it did bad, but we mustn't forget about the actual fallout from the nuclear testing. There had been various debates over just how much radiation exposure and nuclear fallout were caused by tests conducted at the Nevada test site. Recently declassified documents have revealed that fallout from the tests drifted across most of the United States. Included in this fallout were particles like iodine-131, which can then enter the body through contaminated food, drinks, or even the air. Once inside the body, the thyroid gland will absorb iodine-131, which then eventually decays, producing radiation that can cause thyroid cancer and other problems. Downwinders, the name given to those that live downwind of nuclear open-air tests, are the subject of an archival project at the University of Utah's J. Willard Marriott Library, which seeks to document the experiences of those who suffered repercussions from the US nuclear weapons tests. In 2011, the US Senate unanimously designated January 27th as the National Day of Remembrance for Downwinders, stating that the downwinders paid a high price for the development of a nuclear weapons program for the benefit of the United States. Although no single illness can be conclusively tied to a test site cause, investigations by the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation and the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War and the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, among others, have established links between radiation exposure and cancer occurrence. In the early 2000s, a report by the NCI and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimated that fallout could have led to around 11,000 excess deaths. We also know from a study conducted in the 1990s that soldiers who were at the Nevada test site have a higher than normal death rate from a variety of cancers, including a 50% higher rate of death from leukemia than other groups of military personnel who were not working on atomic testing sites. By the way, if anybody is interested in an episode looking at some of those military exercises, please let us know in the comments. The most controversial discussion related to the health fallout of the atomic testing revolves around whether the potential dangers were known or unknown by the government. Some feel that they must have known, which places a lot more blame on the government for the eventual consequences, while others believe that the potential dangers were unknown and could not have been foreseen. The atomic culture craze of the mid-20th century serves to remind us that nothing about the Cold War is simple or straightforward. As much as Americans feared the bomb, they were also fascinated by it and couldn't stop themselves from wanting to see history in the making. When you consider that America was born from armed revolt and then continues to celebrate its own birthday with explosives and alcohol, I suppose it sheds some light on why so many people gathered in the Sky Room at the Desert Inn to watch the atomic bomb light up the sky with a cocktail in hand. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss our future work, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and have pressed the bell button. It's the radioactive source in the middle of the garden, helping to produce some truly huge like buttons. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thecoldwar or through YouTube membership. We can be reached via email at thecoldwarchannel@gmail.com. This is the Cold War Channel, and as we think about the Cold War, please remember that history is shades of gray and rarely black and white.